Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Christopher Knowles. First, a few announcements. Great ways to help support Forbidden Knowledge News. First, go get a Rokfin premium membership. You go to rokfin.com/FKN+. With that, you'll get access to not only all of our premium content, but all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin, as well as access to our Forbidden documentary series. If you'd like to help with production of our next film, the Forbidden documentary Doorways of Perception, you can make a donation by using the links right in the description. Anything is greatly appreciated. You can also help by downloading our episodes directly through our podcast provider, Spreaker. That is always free to you. Finally, booking guests for April. If you have suggestions or you would like to be a guest, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome Christopher Knowles. He is author of several books and was a longtime associate editor and contributing writer for Comic Book Artist magazine and has contributed feature articles to magazines like Comic Book Marketplace and Comic Book Resources. He has many lectures on pop culture and mythology, and he has appeared on numerous podcasts and radio talk shows. Christopher, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm on top of the world, looking down on creation.
Excellent. That's a wonderful place to be, man. I can't wait to get into this. I followed your work for a long time, and we were finally able to make this interview happen. I'm stoked. I've been very much looking forward to this. I want to get your insights and theories surrounding the true nature of reality, the events currently unfolding from a synchromistic understanding, and the powers and intelligences that may be pulling strings, may be attempting to steer humanity in different directions. I like to try and understand the deepest levels of this human experience. Is this reality contained and possibly controlled by archonic parasitic entities, or is this for us to learn and grow based on duality of our experiences? Or maybe it's a little bit of all of the above. I want to get your insights into all of it. It covers a lot of ground, lots to discuss. Before we get into it, though, this is your first time on. Let the audience know that may not be familiar a little bit more about yourself and what led you down your path.
Oh, God. Well, I'm Chris Knowles. I've been doing the Secret Sun blog for about 17 years now. I've written a number of books: Our Gods Wear Spandex, Secret History of Comic Book Heroes, Secret History of Rock and Roll, Complete X-Files. That was the official book. He Will Live Up in the Sky is my novel. Endless American Midnight, it's a collection of my essays. My new book is called The Spandex Files, which is sort of a epitaph for the comic books and superheroes, which are most definitely on their last legs. I've been sort of telling people for a number of years now that this party isn't going to last forever. There's only a finite limit to what can be done and the stories that can be told, and we're certainly at the end of it now, aren't we? With Madam Web belly flopping like nothing has belly flopped before. I mean, it's over. The thing is too is that I wrote an essay about 12 years. No, yeah, about 12 years ago now. And I talked about how like pop culture had exhausted itself and there were no new stories being told. What we saw is just using CGI, computer technology, and so on. It was just a recycling. But I said a number of years ago that, these stories aren't new. There's nothing new going on. This is all just rehash of things that were written 30, 40, 50 years ago. And now we're at the end of the line. So that's a lot of what the Spandex Files encapsulates, because it's sort of my farewell. This whole career of mine, the second career of mine, started with Our Gods with Spandex, which just letting you know, I mean, I'm recently retired from art now, but I was a professional artist for 35 years. Started when I was in high school, worked for Marvel, doing artwork for the movies and stuff for about 25 years. No, yeah, 25 years, because I started in 95 and I stopped working for them, when they just sort of fell apart in 2020. I sort of had I sort of had I knew that things were bad, when my phone stopped ringing. The last thing I worked on was the Eternals, and that was a total belly flop. Um, so yes, I've been writing for a number of years. I started blogging before I did The Secret Sun. I started blogging, I think about 2004. I had a blog on Zanga, and I've done a lot of work in the synchromistic realm. I mean, I've done a lot of other work on The Secret Sun as well, a lot of, pop culture and socio-political and sort of spiritual observations. But a lot of synchromistic work is sort of how the blog made its name. And I'd been doing synchromistic work per se, as it's understood, before it was called that. I mean, I started doing it in the early 90s. I had actually written an article for the Secret Sun back in September, talking about my history with that, and it sort of started with my interest in Carl Jung and so on. And I started getting interested in conspiracy material in the early, at the same time in the early 90s. Had this sort of epiphany on the Sunday before the X-Files premiered. Yeah. So I know I've done a lot of work, and a lot. I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant or anything, but people have been ripping my work off left and right for years, 15, almost 20 years now. A lot of the things, interestingly enough, I mean, I saw, there was, remember the Q drops back in like 2017?
Oh, yeah.
They were like taking stuff like from pieces I had published on the Secret Sun like a couple days before and putting them into the Q drops. And I was like, come on, give me a break. But there were a lot of blogs. I mean, a lot of people who made a lot of money sort of
oh, yeah,
building off a lot of the things that I sort of put out there. But it's never been about money for me. I'm really a disgustingly non-materialistic person. I'm not motivated by that. I'm motivated by, I'm a truth seeker, searcher, looking for the ultimate ground of reality. That's far more rewarding and interesting to me than mere material, which again I've not pursued with any sense of alacrity. But anyhow, yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. I've been doing the Patreon Secret Sun Institute for Advanced Synchromysticism, and that thing has been rocking and rolling for almost 4 years now. Really intense. We've been doing tons of live streams, 3-4 hour live streams, but all like not just like sitting around gabbing, just heavy duty information. I'll do these slideshows and give people, the benefit of my knowledge that I've accrued over the years. So yeah, so that's kind of it. I hope that's satisfactory. I mean, it's a little bit rambling, but
no, man, that's great. Perfect introduction. Great way to start us off. I thought we would start with some of the biggest questions, something that I opened with, and work our way outward from there to some of the more materialistic layers and aspects that we're dealing with. Starting with, what is this experience that we have here? Like I said in the beginning, are we sort of enclosed in this experimental space, possibly by these entities that we don't understand, that may have certain intentions for us, maybe feeding off of us? We just may be a loose form for some of these entities, who knows? Or is this our experience? Is this experience for us? Do we require these nasty entities and these lower vibrational, what you would consider demons, to be part of this experience so that we can learn and grow and become better and evolve as humans? Let's start there and see where we go.
Oh gosh, you just want to start
Start
with little trifles, right?
Big.
Well, first of all, we're in paradise. We are in the champagne room of the universe. As far as we know, it doesn't get any better than this. So put that in perspective, I think a lot of people just have poor expectations and misapprehensions about life and what it is and where they are. I mean, start with the fact that you are in paradise, even, some of the most inhospitable climes you can imagine on this planet. I mean, you have free oxygen and free sunlight and, most of the time free water and so on. So we are here. And I think it's very important to put aside sort of these leftover Gnostic ideas about, the all of creation being some sort of abortion, a mistake, and also put aside all this nonsensical science fiction Hollywood crap about traveling to other planets and other star systems. Nobody's, I tell people all the time, nobody's ever going anywhere. And believe me, I used to buy that stuff just as much as anyone, but it's all nonsense because there's nowhere to go. I mean, forget about flat Earth or whatever, just for a moment, and just like, where are you going to go? I mean, where, as far as we know, I mean, our common understanding is that there's no air or water on the moon. Mars is a hellscape. Outside of our biosphere, it's hell. It's literal hell. So why the hell would you want to go there? I mean, all this science fiction nonsense, it's all leftover colonialism, really. It's sort of trying to keep a sort of that colonial imperialist idea alive through fantasy. But it's all, and this, something I've been working on a lot is how a lot of science fiction and fantasy is just so pedo up and down the line. I mean, we don't realize how a lot of these fantasies that we've allowed to infect our mind came from very sick souls, very, very sick people, people who have serious mental, sexual, physical, spiritual issues to contend with. And we need to purge that from our consciousness because it's past its due date. And one of the things I say is that we tend to sort of have like this feeling like, oh my God, what I used to like was so terrible. It's just like, look at life as a journey. You're into something, I can say I was into all the science fiction nonsense. And I don't sit there and like get the hair shit on and start whipping myself in the back, because with the cat o' nine tails, because I fell for this nonsense. It's part of your journey. I mean, life is a journey. Life is an adventure. Life is a ride, as the late, great Bill Hicks once said. So look at it in that context. And I think that, your experience will automatically improve. And also, one thing that I say is really important is, an attitude of gratitude. Just be grateful. Be great. Think of other people in this world, other people in this country, other people maybe in your town who don't have the things that you have, who haven't had the experiences that you have, and be grateful for it. Have an attitude of gratitude. That's just going to completely change. And I think a lot of these kind of ideas, like I'm in my, what I call my post-gnosis period, where I was really into the Gnostic stuff because I was really sick and I was in a tremendous amount of pain and I was on a tremendous amount of drugs, like really, really powerful drugs, opioids and all sorts of other nonsense. That sort of put me, it imprisoned me inside my head. And I think that's a large part of like this kind of post-matrix Gnostic or bastardized Gnostic thinking. Is just being present inside yourself. The self, your head is a prison. Get outside of it. Once you can really learn to put yourself outside the ego, which again is a prison, you're going to have a much greater experience of life. So, in order, in answer to your question, it's an adventure. It's a story. So all these other influences and aspects and challenges and dangers that we face in life are all part of our journey. They're all part of our story. So if you learn to put these things into these contexts, you're going to have a much broader and deeper experience of life and not be just hostage to momentary impulses.
You said something earlier that I want to branch off a little bit and explore how a lot of these ideologies that have influenced humanity are based off of these like pedophilic type of personalities that have risen to the top somehow throughout human history. Why is this that the psychopaths, these pedophiles, these horrible human beings always rise to the top and dictate the ideologies passed down from there?
Well, a lot of it has to do with they're willing to put into the time into their ambitions. They have their lives are completely unbalanced. They have no appreciation of simple pleasures in life. Everything is this drive. And a lot of these people, a lot of the people, maybe not so much at the top, but sort of in the support system underneath them, like literally have no lives outside of their tasks, whether it's work or some sort of mission that they're on. And, when you're sort of trapped inside yourself, it reminds me very much what Charlie Manson said about being in solitary confinement, is that he really used his imagination. He really learned to transcend common, ordinary, imagination and fantasy and get into something much, much deeper. And I think that was a huge part of his control over people, was the fact that, he spent all this time in solitary confinement, and he'd take the threads from his socks and make them into little puppets and have little puppet shows, right? Just that kind of thing. It's like, but that is the power of the sociopathic mind, is that they can place themselves outside of ordinary human experience because by their very nature, they're alienated from common, ordinary human experience. And they have a deep resentment of that. They have a deep resentment of just ordinary people just going through lives. They see themselves as gods, basically. And they see their whims, their sexual fantasies, as almost like the greatest good. I was reading this very interesting article by John Michael Greer last night, and it was talking about neo-paganism and all this kind of things. And he's an extremely intelligent guy and very well read. And he was talking about how all these occult groups that we heard so much about from like the 19th century, 17th, 18th, 19th century, Hellfire Club, and on and on and on, OTO, Golden Dawn, all these groups, they were basically just sex clubs. They were just basically a way for, not tremendously attractive or sexually appealing people to have, sex with as many partners as, you could imagine. And Greer really laid it out that all the, neo-paganism, particularly Wicca, he's completely, anybody who knows anything about the history of neo-paganism or witchcraft, it just thinks Wicca is a joke, because it is a joke. It's, Gerald Gardner just sort of building off of what Aleister Crowley was, raving and drooling on about. But it really was just like it was a big sex cult. It was just a way for unattractive people to have lots of sex with other unattractive people, basically. But it's sort of metastasized because, when you make sex your religion, the sexual imagination goes to very dark places. And I think a lot of the first of all, I think a lot of the pedophilia comes from it. I think a lot of these people who do become involved in neo-paganism, the occult, science fiction, fantasy, on and on and on, all experienced a tremendous amount of sexual trauma when they were younger. And they never moved past it. They were never able to, they got stuck there. So say somebody like a Walter Breen, I don't know if you know who that is, but he was one of the sort of figureheads of neo-paganism and LARPing and Renaissance fairs, cosplay. All these kind of things. He was a complete and total pedophile and died in prison for it. But, he had obviously experienced, severe sexual trauma in his preteen years, and he was never able to move past it. He was never able to process it. He got stuck there. His sexual development was retarded, like literally retarded, at that age. And I think that is so, I started going to conventions and stuff when I was very young, and I started getting involved in like comic book fandom when I was very, very young. And I'll tell you, I mean, you really had to get smart fast, because there are a lot of sexual predators in those circles. And you really had to learn, you had to get street smart about how to avoid that stuff. I mean, I was already street smart because of just being a total feral latchkey kid, basically, when I was growing up. But
yeah.
No, but so all these fantasies, so space fantasies, I mean, just think about somebody like Arthur C. Clarke, who is sort of one of the big granddaddies of space colonization and all these kind of things. Total pedophile, unrepentant, unapologetic. Moved to Sri Lanka just to have access to young boys without consequence. And there are several examples like that. I mean, even the ones that aren't just like splat out criminal pedophiles, you could just tell there's like something wrong with them. Like Robert A. Heinlein, author of Starship Troopers, wrote, in his later years, he started getting really weird with the sex stuff. And it's very, very toxic, and it has had an outsized influence because the military-industrial complex found these space fantasies to be incredibly advantageous to their real goal, which is just plundering the treasury on a 24-hour basis. They found, creating nonsense, just complete and foolish nonsense like NASA and these fake moon missions and everything like that was an excellent way to just bleed the treasury dry. So they were using a lot of money. They were putting a lot of money into Hollywood to create these fantasies. There was a tremendous amount of overlap between like CIA, NASA, Department of Defense, Pentagon, all these kind of people, because they wanted these fantasies to be almost like dominant in the culture, because it was an excellent way for them to create all this fake nonsense like Star Wars SDI and, like I said, the moon missions and all these just incredible boondoggles that they could, like I said, they could just bleed the treasury completely dry, which they have done. They have done since. So science fiction and Hollywood were very much accomplices to that. But also, one thing that I'd written about earlier, has to do with a recent live stream I did. It was just talking about how complicit Hollywood was in the serial killer phenomenon, because we started seeing all these serial killers show up in the mid to late 60s. And at the same time, we had all the rise of the slasher films. And the rise and fall of the slasher film tracks almost, precisely with the rise and fall of the serial killers. So again, I mean, Hollywood is complicit in this. Hollywood was probably under orders. The serial killers were a great way to pass all these restrictions, these restrictive laws, and just basically tear apart the social fabric, which is what the military-industrial complex was has always been very interested in doing, just sort of creating this compartmentalized, almost sort of dystopian hellscape certainly out of America. So the serial killers were an excellent tool to achieve those ends, and that's why Hollywood was tasked to basically encourage a lot of screwed up young men to go out and kill women, predominantly women. And then also like the school shooters, which, is also driven by intelligence and Hollywood as well. So,
well, this leads to what is unfolding now through the culture creation of Hollywood. Before what happened with COVID, we had a certain state that Hollywood was in and that we were used to and that we interacted with, and things have changed. Things are rapidly changing now with everything that's happened with the pandemic and everything that's unfolded after, we are having this different outlook, and what's happening to Hollywood from the inside, it seems to be crumbling and
my God,
being destroyed from the inside. And I'm very curious as to see what will rise out of those ashes. We are seeing a lot more independent folks, a lot more people like yourself and myself going out there and creating this new form of entertainment that a lot of people seem to be gravitating towards. Whenever all this first started unfolding and I looked at everything from attempted to look at it from a bigger picture, it seemed like we were going through the apocalypse for a little while. Seems very doom and gloom. Wars, rumors of wars, pandemics, all these things. But as everything continued to unfold and as I got a better understanding of how everything is working, it's more of an evolution of humanity in certain ways. And the more that we understand about what's happening behind the scenes and the corruption and how we've been played, the more that we can navigate our way through these insane waters that we're seeing. And I see collectively we're slowly coming to a better understanding of everything and navigating these waters, seemingly avoiding this apocalyptic future, right? What do you think?
Well, I mean, we are in the apocalypse. We've been in the apocalypse before. It's a cyclical process. That's just part of this cyclical churn that human culture seems to go through. Evolution is another thing that we're sort of conditioned to believe. We always saw, those little charts where, you start with a little chimp and it's like all of a sudden, it's a guy with like test tubes and a microscope or something.
Right.
That is Masonic. Darwinian evolution is just basically Freemasonic propaganda. It's this, you can actually see, Freemasonic icons and images that, again, it's this whole thing, you're climbing this ladder that, they say the evolutionary ladder, they'll have these images of these staircases where you're going up these degrees. I mean, Darwinian, I believe in, obviously survival of the fittest. I don't believe in it like that's, I'm like some sort of Nietzschean or something, but it's just like that's kind of obvious, or it has been obvious, even though we're sort of in this period now where it seems like the unfittest are surviving, but that will correct itself. Right. But like I said, Darwinian evolution comes from the Royal Society, which is it's basically a wing of Freemasonry. And this whole idea that, we're inevitably going up these steps sort of leads to it, that these things I was talking about before, like space and space colonization and all this kind of nonsense, because it's inevitable, because that is part of our conditioning that comes to us through Hollywood and schools and science and so on, quote unquote science, which is really just, like I said, Masonic propaganda. So one thing that I like to tell people is that if you actually read the book of Revelation, it's got like the happiest ending of any story ever. You know what I'm saying? So people use the term apocalyptic because like we're conditioned by Hollywood. It's like, it's going to be like The Road, and then everything is just going to be just desolate and, we're all just going to die off and all these kind of things. That's Hollywood. That's science fiction. That's drama. That's not reality. There have been, large and small apocalypses throughout history. And it's just part of, like I said, it's just churn. It's almost like a reset on the program, and things kind of get thrown up in the air and then they eventually, fall back to earth and reform themselves. Great example is, what we call the quote unquote dark ages. First of all, it's kind of a misnomer, but really what happened is that there were all these, natural disasters and climate conditions that we still are trying to understand. But basically, the population of Europe was just absolutely decimated because something happened. Something happened that just sort of laid everything to waste. It didn't happen in China. It didn't happen in other parts of the world. It happened like predominantly in Western Europe. I mean, the Roman Empire, which had just picked up stakes and moved to Constantinople, to Turkey, they were doing fine. I mean, but it was like Western Europe, something happened that just really messed things up. Before the colonists came in the Americas, or well, actually, sort of as the colonists were coming, or maybe I'm not exactly sure of the timeline, but there was this huge die-off in the Western Hemisphere, and some of it had to do with like being exposed to diseases like smallpox, which they had no experience with, no, the native peoples here had no immunity to all these Western diseases. There was an apocalypse in the Mediterranean during the 19th century BC, when, again, a lot of theories like Santorini erupted and basically blotted out the sun, and crops died, and we just started seeing all these massive migrations, peoples just sort of moving in, what they call the sea peoples. I mean, just laid empire after empire after empire to waste. The Ugarit people, the Hittite Empire, all these major empires in the Mediterranean were destroyed. But that set the stage for the rise of like Mycenaean Greece and all these new cultures, the Phoenicians and so on. So it is part of the churn. I mean, it is part of the human story. I can't, I'm not God, so I can't tell you what the ultimate meaning of it is. I can just tell you that, be not afraid. I mean, this is just the way things work. This is the way things have always worked.
Yeah.
We are definitely, we're sort of slow walking into World War III. I mean, you have theater after theater being set up to erupt, centered in large part in the Middle East. This whole situation in Gaza, and then Hezbollah is getting involved. I mean, it's eventually going to become a regional war, but it's part of this greater war. But it's not going to be like World War II, where you're just throwing munitions en masse everywhere. Yeah. It's going to be or World War I, where everybody sort of digs into the trenches. Even though the Russians tried to fight World War II in Ukraine, realized that model wasn't applicable anymore, and basically made it World War I. I mean, they just dug in, and that's basically what kind of defeated the NATO program in Ukraine. I mean, the NATO is always, NATO is hostage to all the big defense contractors, Lockheed, DynCorp, Boeing, all these companies that are, always selling all this gee whiz technology. So the Western militaries became addicted to that, but those weapons are only as good as the people using them. And, our people, the Western militaries are no good anymore. I mean, they're a joke. Even compared to what they were 30 years ago, they're a joke. And it's just completely fallen apart. So the long and short of this is that, yeah, we are in this apocalyptic process, but people forget what apocalypse actually means. It means disclosure, unveiling, right? Revelation. I mean, what happens is that things get mixed up. We see how things really are. We see the way the world really works. We see the way what human nature really is, not this sort of myth that Hollywood and high technology taught us. And then everything gets thrown up in the air. Everything gets displaced. But there's always a rebuilding process. So I don't believe, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if you read the book of Revelation, not only does it have like the happiest ending ever, but it tells you that it's going to happen again. Like, yeah, it says like, Satan will be imprisoned for 1,000 years and then he'll be released. So what it's telling you is that this is going to happen again, right? This process is going to take place. It's going to have a very happy ending, but 1,000 years later, it's all going to, reestablish itself. And that's the way, I see the world. I mean, I'm very much I believe in the cycles of nature and the cycles of creation, the cycles of existence. Everything to me is cyclical. And one of the reasons I believe this is that, I'm obviously had a lot of time on this planet. You know what I mean? So I'm able to see things at a different perspective than, younger guys like yourself. So.
Yeah, right on, man. Now, this leads me back to where I wanted to go with your insights into Hollywood and what's happening now with our entertainment industry overall. Where do you see this going, and what do you see the future holding when it comes to what we're interacting with our entertainment? AI is very interesting with what's happening now and how it is affecting a lot of people's creative energies and what they're putting out there and how they're creating things now with assistance of this technology. How do you see all this unfolding?
Well, like I said, I mean, this was sort of my career for a number of years, starting in the 80s, working in media, working in entertainment, film industry, all these sort of things. It's collapsing. We're at the end of the age of Hollywood, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. There are a number of different problems here. A lot of it is the way media works now, where we're in this 24/7 churn, this endless bombardment of information via the internet and social media. That's not conducive to fictional narratives. I mean, fictional narratives just start to seem trite. So this has actually been going on for a while. So Hollywood's reaction to that, when all the sort of mid-list movies that they used to make a lot of money on, rom-coms and thrillers and all these kind of things that you could make for relatively low budgets, but would do very well at it was almost like pure profit in some ways. When those things started to fail at the box office and you start to see the migration to things like Netflix, Hollywood's reaction to that was superhero tentpole movies. Tentpoles really started in the 70s with, Jaws was really the first one. And then, of course, Star Wars just broke the whole thing open. And Star Wars created a template that everybody tried to follow ever since. But the problem is that there's only so many times you can go back to the same well, especially when you have hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people trying to go to that same well, trying to feed from that same trough. Eventually, the well runs dry. The well runs dry a while ago. Science fiction movies were very big for a number of years. I mean, just think in the 90s when you had like Stargate and Independence Day and Species. I mean, all these big sci-fi. Event Horizon is another one. Sci-fi, space fantasy, and all that stuff was very big. People just got tired of it. And then the superheroes kind of took over in the early 2000s and really climaxed, I think, with Avengers Endgame. And I think the problem with a lot of normies is that they saw that as like, that was the return of the king, right? I mean, that was the end of the story. I mean, that was the return of the Jedi. I mean, it was just like, okay, this is over. The story's over now. It's amazing to me how many people, like normies that I know, are just like, well, why would I go see this new superhero movie when it all just sort of became almost extraneous after Endgame? I mean, how do you follow up those two movies, Infinity Gauntlet and Endgame? You just don't. It's you cannot follow on it. And the other problem too, I mean, there are other logistical problems. We saw the strikes this year, the writers and the actors strike. Hollywood, their reaction to that, and they've not been shy about letting people know this, is they're just slashing their slates. I mean, movies that had been in production are canceled. Movies that were finished are deleted. Like they just literally destroy the entire movie so they can use it as a tax write-off. You know what I mean? I mean, but we had the special effects people were striking. They just got tired of doing more and more work for less and less money. And I got to tell you something, I kind of felt the same way, because when I first started, I first started working for Marvel when they were Toy Biz. And then Toy Biz became Marvel. But I remember when Disney bought them out, I was just like, oh, why did they do that? Marvel could have destroyed Disney if they felt like it, if they really wanted to. And Disney destroyed them. I mean, everything, just the entire mood, everything. It was so much fun working for Marvel before Disney bought them out. And then it just became a chore. And I'll tell you, I think the stress and the hours that I was putting in, and they just want more and more for less and less, was a huge aggravating factor in these health problems that I was having. I mean, I know for a fact that it was. And just multiply that times the thousands and thousands. Just think of all these CGI artists. Go watch a movie. Just go watch like Endgame, and you're going to see like 20 minutes of credits at the end. I mean, thousands and thousands of people. They can't afford these people anymore. They can't afford this stuff. But they also have the problem that the new generations just don't have the work ethic, and to their credit, they don't want to sacrifice their lives for these horrible, greedy, evil corporations like Disney. They don't want any part of it. But the other problem, the flip side of that is a lot of them just don't have the skills. They don't have this. They can't do it. I mean, I can't count the amount of superhero movies over the past 3 or 4 years that everybody is saying, "Oh my God, these special effects are terrible. The CGI is terrible, terrible." And it's like, yeah, you notice it, but I'll tell you something. Go watch Captain America: Civil War, Thor: Ragnarok, any of the Avengers movies, any of the Iron Man movies. Go watch them on TV. They look like video games. I mean, that kind of CGI just looks like crap. It just looks so fake on TV. And then, the rise of streaming, I think, played into that, because people are sitting home, let's watch this Marvel movie. And just like, this looks like a 90s video game. I want to watch this shit. So the economics of scale that Hollywood adopted to deal with the rise of streaming and the incredible loss of income that streaming presented when it just basically destroyed the DVD market. I don't know if you heard, but Best Buy just removed all their DVDs and Blu-rays from the stores. Really? You can't get those stuff. I mean, that was one of the last places that Best Buy was one of the last brick and mortar stores that you could go in and buy those things. They're all gone.
Yeah.
The loss of the DVD revenue, I mean, was a huge, huge problem. But the other problem is, I mean, they've made so many, the whole woke thing came in and just turned millions of people off. Hollywood lost $500 billion in value in 2023. Think about that number for a minute. Jeez. $500 billion of just flushed down the drain. And a lot of it had to do with like these crappy movies. A lot of it had to do with all the absolute woke nonsense, because these people all live in bubbles. Okay. Like they seriously do. They have no experience with world outside, their little coastal upper class elite communities. They don't understand how other people live. They don't understand how other people think. They have these messianic delusions that hyperprivilege always instills in people. Everything becomes about their narcissistic identities, usually based in contrived sexualities, right? Pronouns, non-binary. I mean, all the rest of this absolute nonsense. And it's killing the goose that laid the golden egg. I mean, media is getting decimated. Layoffs are absolutely cataclysmic. Hollywood lost $500 billion last year. Now, so the latest idea that they try to think, well, okay, so Hollywood's dying. Let's do the virtual reality thing. I think that Mark Zuckerberg lost like $50 billion trying to make the metaverse happen. $50 billion. And now, I'm telling people always go, oh, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. It's like, no, I've been following virtual reality since the early 90s, before a lot of the people who criticized me were even born. Okay. And I just remember like time and time and time again, people putting all this money into virtual reality and it just failed. And the latest cataclysmic failure, and it is going to be a cataclysmic failure, believe me, is the Apple Vision Pro, because they put all this hype into it. And first of all, I was watching all these videos with all the screens and everything, and I was just like, this is pathetic. Like, this is a joke. I mean, who the hell would spend $3,500 for this nonsense? And now, I mean, one of the problems is that the basic mechanics of virtual reality do not work, because the way the way your eyes work, you get vertigo, you get nausea. It's called VR sickness. And Apple said, oh, no, we solved that problem. Well, guess what? They didn't. And now people en masse who spent $3,500 for these things that everybody says is really uncomfortable. Some people say it makes their eyes bleed. I mean, are you kidding me? And it's going to be a disaster. I mean, Apple has already been, I mean, listen, they have more money than God, but it's like they have a lot of challenges because of China and so on, and competition from, companies like, what is it, Huawei. They've got a lot of problems. This whole virtual reality thing is never ever going to work, ever. Okay, because unless there's some massive reconception of how you present it, because those goggles and the headphones and everything like that make people sick without fail. And Apple said, oh no, we've conquered that problem. They lied. So what is the mass entertainment as we know it is over. Mass media as we knew it is over. Hollywood is over. Virtual reality will, unless, like I said, there's some complete ground up reconception of the concept, is over. All right. It's just all these things are over. And I see this as a net positive, because I don't think people should allow themselves to become hypnotized by these fantasies, particularly, like I said, when if you really start digging at the roots, you realize just how many people who create these fantasies were really mentally sick. So for instance, I recently did this, it was about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now. Time's moving so quickly. But I did this thing on Wonder Woman, okay? And I was talking about how the guy who invented Wonder Woman was, first of all, he was one of the Army's first psychological warfare instructors, okay, back in the 20s, right? I mean, he was one of the guys who helped, like Michael Aquino, right? You probably know that name.
Yeah.
But he was also, he was like into femdom, feminine domination, and all this kind of stuff. And he put that all in his stories, but he was also into bondage. And he's also like, if you look at a lot of those old Wonder Woman comic books, I mean, the pedophilia is off the charts. But it's everywhere. I mean, Batman. And people knew about this stuff in the 50s. Somehow we forgot. There was this whole thing that arose in the early 50s. This German psychologist named Frederick Wertham, who fled Hitler, right? And he came to America and saw what pop culture was doing. He said, this is going to lead to fascism. The same kind of fantasies that America is instilling in its youth were the same kind of fantasies that the Nazis were instilling in the 30s in their children, right? It's the same thing. But, and the part and parcel of this is this whole pederasty vibe that, all the major, certainly the major DC superheroes all the kid sidekicks and everything. I mean, this stuff, you go back and look at those comics and you think like, what the hell were people thinking? Like, you just look at this stuff. It's so perverted. Oh my God. Like Batman and Robin, sleeping in bed together and stuff. And up and down the line, up and down the line. And you start digging into the biographies, a lot of the people who were creating these stories, and there's just something off about most of them. And we let these people into our psyches. We let their sick fantasies into our psyches because we're all hypnotized. And like I said, I mean, I'm as guilty as anyone. I'm more guilty than anyone, But I'm just sitting there, like I said, with the hair shirt and the cat o' nine tails, flagellating myself for being fooled by the stuff. But, it's just part of the journey. It was part of, it's part of our collective journey. So I think the healthy thing to do is just to move on and learn lessons from these experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, just become aware of what you're taking in and what is really behind some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to get into something that's really interesting. The ritualistic nature of things we're seeing on TV, like things from the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift phenomena that has been occurring over the past few months, everything that seems to lead the collective in certain directions when it comes to these ritualistic events that happen at the Super Bowl, these large, high-impact events that really have an effect, and the use of celebrities that are off the scale popular and in the consciousness at a large scale, like Taylor Swift. What is happening here?
They're all puppets.
Right.
They're all totally controlled. Yeah. Ritualism has been a part of statecraft forever. You cannot name a single society or culture or nation or empire that didn't have ritualism at its center. It wasn't always theological ritualism, but it was still there. I mean, even quote unquote communist, atheistic countries adopted, the iconography of like medieval Catholicism to sell communism. So you had like the saints and the holy texts, Mao's Little Red Book or the Communist Manifesto or Das Kapital. You would see these big parades where they have it's like literally like the icons of the saints, where they'd have these big banners with Marx and Engels and Lenin and Stalin and Mao, whoever. But if you really look at the mechanics of how the communist, quote unquote, atheistic cultures ran their own rituals, it's just straight up religion. It's communism as religion. And the Nazis did the same thing. So you have these powerful icons, the swastika or the hammer and sickle in place of the cross, right? It's all part of the same mentality. But there's another issue here too, and this is something that I have a special insight on, having, OCD. I recognize that, all the ritualism is based in anxiety. OCD ritualism is based in anxiety. In my case, you get these intrusive thoughts, and you sort of have to, how do you make this go away? Well, I make it go away by hyper-focusing on my obsessions. And that's how I sort of manage this anxiety that I can't control, right? That's just sort of part of my nature. Well, statecraft is the same way. First of all, like I said, you have a lot of people who are gravitated to the mechanics of power, who are mentally imbalanced in some way or another, have some sort of mental illness issue in their jackets. But also, I mean, just the absolute anxiety that power brings. Okay, power brings anxiety because you're constantly worried about somebody else taking your power away from you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Whether it's your rivals or the masses. And we have a very sick and diseased and imbalanced ruling class right now. I mean, we have the worst ruling class this country has ever seen. Okay. And they've all grown up in these bubbles of extreme hyperprivilege. They have no concept of how the world actually works and how people actually live. So they're in this constant state of hypervigilance because they feel like they're constantly under attack. So ritualism is a powerful tool in helping to ameliorate that anxiety, but it's also a powerful tool of crowd control, of social control. And the Super Bowl, which I've been doing things, analyses, symbolic and ritualistic analyses of the Super Bowl since I started the blog, right? I mean, for a long time I've been doing this work. I can't imagine anyone else was doing it before me. I can't think of anyone else who's doing the Super Bowl stuff before me, but also the elections. I started looking at all the campaign logos that all these candidates would use and just seeing all the, sort of esoteric and occult symbolism that they use. But again, I mean, when you really get down to it, I mean, we're all just people, right? There are no gods out there, in these offices. And like I said, I mean, our current class of rulers are like the sickest, weakest, most incompetent, most paranoid, least experienced we've ever had. It used to be like there was an expectation that if you wanted to rise to sort of the upper echelon in this country, you had to have been through the military, preferably as an officer. You had to have some sort of trauma and crisis in your life that you came through that you showed that you could get the job done. That's how it used to be in this country up until not that long ago. But following, maybe say Nixon, well, I mean, Carter was a Navy man. He had combat experience. I would say starting with Reagan, Reagan was a Hollywood actor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you had Bush, who was, evil CIA guy. And then you had Clinton, who was just basically an actor. You had George W. Bush, who was an actor. You had Obama, who was an actor. You had Trump, who was a literal TV actor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've had unreality. We none of these people have any actual real world, say, military or combat experience like we once expected our presidents and our senators to have. They're all come from privileged backgrounds. They all have very shady patrons and handlers. I mean, we really do. And this is why, for instance, the situation in Ukraine has just been an absolute catastrophe for our ruling elites. They really thought that they were going to be able to just use this to destroy Russia, with the sanctions and everything like that. But it's all boomeranged on them. And it's boomeranged on them because all these things were thought up in think tanks by people from the Ivy League, not people who had military experience. And that's just the way it is. So, now, what was your question again? Oh, the ritualism. So, I mean, basically what it boils down to is that ritualism is a response to anxiety, always has been. We've got to ameliorate the gods. We've got to pacify. We need to seek petition from the gods. And we have to get their attention with these huge displays, or it used to be, sacrifices. I mean, in the ancient world, in the pre-Christian era, blood sacrifice was the currency of religion. And in many cases, human sacrifice, sort of the hinterlands. Human sacrifice was seen as sort of déclassé and primitive by, the metropolitan elites. But They had no problem with like, cattle and sheep and goats and everything being led into these temples all day long to be slaughtered and burnt on these altars. Whether it's in Jerusalem or Greece or Rome, it was all the same practices. And it really was about like, feeding the gods, seeking their favor, seeking their approval. And that was one of the reasons why Christians were looked down upon, because it was part of Christian doctrine not to make sacrifices to the gods. So to the emperor. So sacrifices to the emperor it was like you burn some incense or you put some seeds in this bowl or something. It really was not a big deal. But Christians were taught that the emperor was Jesus and Jesus was returning soon, and they didn't want to be on the bad side of that, so they would not make sacrifices to the empire, and that would just land you on death list, because if you were not willing to make sacrifices to the emperor, you were seen as not only unpatriotic, but they called Christians atheists. You didn't recognize the power of the gods. So like I said, ritualism has always been with us, and it's always been a central part of statecraft. It just changed. We are in this consumerist culture, where consumerism is the highest goal and the highest good. So all our rituals tend to have that patina of merchandising and consumerism at their core. For instance, the Super Bowl.
What I want to close on, last few minutes we have, is where you see the alien understanding and agendas going. More and more in our mainstream media and news stories, we're seeing these paranormal, supernatural stories sort of emerge, mostly surrounding the alien and extraterrestrial phenomena, and there seems to be a quickening of these events. The more that they appear in our media, the more of an interest, and it keeps growing and growing. Where do you see this going? What's going on with the aliens?
Well, it's all being directed by the CIA and the Pentagon. They're not even hiding that.
Right.
I think ultimately, I think it's just nobody believes in space exploration anymore. Nobody's interested in going to the moon or going to Mars anymore. Elon Musk says he is, but that's just to disguise the fact that SpaceX exists to test missiles for the military, not spacecraft. It's been a elite military fixation since the 1940s. People forget, or they never knew, that ufology was driven in large part by the military, particularly the Navy, specifically naval intelligence. There was an early group called NICAP, which was the National Investigative Committee of Area Phenomena, and the entire board was all flag officers from the Navy and Marines and so on. It was a military program. Okay, straight up, the military has always used UFO sightings and lore for whatever purposes they have. But I think, and this is where I may differentiate from a lot of other theorists or observers or researchers, I think that there are a lot of people in the military that believe this stuff straight up, that really believe it and see this as a manifestation of their gods, who are the Watchers. Now, back in the 40s, I don't know if you're familiar with Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was, okay, so you know about Jack Parsons, you know about Marjorie Cameron, right, in the Babylon working. Yeah. So he comes back, he and Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard go off into the desert and like masturbate and wave swords around and just do stupid shit for a couple weeks. And they come back and Marjorie Cameron's waiting, at Jack Parsons' mansion, the parsonage. And he's like, oh my God, Babylon heard my prayers and sent the Scarlet Woman. Well, that's not exactly what happened. What happened is that Marjorie Cameron was the naval intelligence operative with top secret clearance, whose brother and father were working for Jet Propulsion Laboratories. So she was placed there. But one thing again, I mean, she was also a true believer, but she had said that because this was concurrent with the rise of the UFOs and so on. She said that the UFOs were what she called war engines of the war engines of the gods, and she sort of saw this as a fulfillment of Aleister Crowley and Book of the Law and so on like that. So one huge mistake that I think a lot of people who research this stuff make is that they don't believe that a lot of people behind the stuff are true blue believers. I don't think they believe in aliens per se. I see this as like, these are their gods. These, what, they're called the Watcher Angels in the Book of Enoch. I've done a lot of work on this, particularly in the past few years, to showing you that this stuff is just hiding in plain sight. Watcher worship is hiding in plain sight. And if you go, so just as another aside here, I was always really puzzled by the Lucis Trust. I remember like back in the early 90s reading about the Lucis Trust, reading all this conspiracy stuff. And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? Because I went to one of their great convocations, and it was not only like the most boring thing I'd ever experienced in my life, and I'm not exaggerating. I was considering momentarily jumping out the window because I was so bored. It was all just a bunch of like little old ladies with like knitting needles and stuff. And I'm thinking, like, why do these people have so much money? Why do they have these offices down in that ziggurat down in lower Manhattan? And then they have these other offices near the Ministry of Defense in London and everything. And like, who's why is Bill Gates putting all his money into this operation, everything like that? And it wasn't until not that long ago when I went back and, because I'm a masochist, started reading Alice Bailey books and discovered she was very explicit about the Watchers. Called them by name, said that they were the real angels, they were the real sons of God. They sacrificed themselves to bring us knowledge. I mean, the Lucis Trust is a Watcher cult. Everyone goes, oh, it's a Lucifer and Satan worship. But it's like, well, you got to be more specific about that, because only, perverts and losers believe in Satan. This is a cult based around the Watcher Angels, who they saw manifest themselves. The Watchers and their offspring, the Nephilim, were the real origin of these stories of the gods and the heroes in ancient mythology. So I think, and I'm glad you brought this up, because this is something that I want to sort of get back into. I believe that this whole UFO thing is part of this Watcher worship. Okay, that there is a huge component of just trying to find, a new piggy bank to break into, right? Now that the whole space thing is kind of falling apart, but I think that I think ultimately it is a religious program, And I've seen UFOs. I mean, I've talked about this. I put photographs I've taken at UFOs, and actually my wife took. We saw this classic chevron UFO just hovering over our neighborhood for like 20 minutes at least a few years back. My son saw UFOs. We saw UFOs. Unfortunately, they were moving so quickly we didn't get a picture of them. But I mean, I had a lot of experience with stuff. I don't think that UFOs are fake or a hoax or anything like that. I think they're real. I just don't think that they're extraterrestrial spacecraft.
Is it part of our collective energies that could be creating this, like an egregore or something that in turn interacts with us in different ways, either individually or sometimes collectively, that is just a part of this field of intelligence? What do you think?
No, I don't think that. I think that the sort of excuse me again, the collective intelligence aspect of it is how we might perceive them and see them. I think that they're real objects. I don't know where they come from. Two of the orbs I saw, there was just no way that they were structured craft, but they were clearly under intelligent control. The chevron that we saw was clearly a structured craft, but it just sat there in the middle of the sky. It just hovered. and then it started making these weird movements, like it was almost like on a track, like it was going up and down and side to side and back to back, like it was on some sort of, like I said, some sort of track of these.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was definitely real. We got pictures of it. The pictures we took are identical to other pictures people have taken and video people have taken of these objects. These objects have been seen for a long time. Okay, they've been around for a long time. I don't know what they are. I mean, could be some super secret physics-defying military technology. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't look aerodynamic to me. I couldn't understand their movements, because when I first saw that one I'm talking about, I was outside with my dog, and I looked up in the sky, and I was like, "Wow, that's a big plane." And then it just stopped. It just stops in the middle of the sky, and I'm like, "All right, planes don't stop. What the hell is that thing?" But the other thing too, there were these lights on the bottom of the chevron, and they were going through this prismatic cycle. So like this sort of rainbow effect. There were three lights on each side of the V, right? And they were going through this like prismatic effect. And I got photographs of those. Or my wife did. We got photographs of that. And that reminded me very much of things that I'd read in John Keel, where he's talking about the super spectrum. I don't know if you're familiar with John Keel.
Yeah.
But, so you talk about the super spectrum and, various forms of light and color that the eye can and cannot perceive. All right. Mm-hmm. And then how a lot of these UFOs sort of existed in the ultraviolet range and so on. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of different things going on. I think like those Nazi UFO stories are all hoaxes. I looked into that and it was clearly all hoax. I think that a lot of the stories about, that we have fleets of UFOs in bunkers, beneath Area 51, I don't believe that. I see no evidence that we've mastered truly exotic space flight technology. We have like really advanced technologies. For instance, the SR-71 Blackbird. Mm. But that's just a souped up hyper physics, but it's physics that we can understand, that people can sort of sit down and work through. I haven't seen any indication that the government or the military or whomever have access to truly exotic craft that defy the laws of physics. I'm not saying that there isn't. I'm just saying that I haven't seen evidence of it.
It may just be that as we become more aware collectively, that we start to perceive these things beyond the spectrum of our normal vision.
We always have. We always have. People have been seeing these things since time immemorial. All right. And so maybe they are the watchers for all I know. You know what I mean? Maybe there are some strange, I used to call what we call aliens the elusive companions, because we've seen to have experienced these things from the beginning of time. I'm sure all your listeners and watchers know about the rock paintings and cave paintings with like flying saucers and so on. A lot of people who work with ayahuasca, a lot of these ayahuasca shamans will do these artworks that all of them have flying saucers in them. They all see that stuff. You're familiar with a lot of this, say, Aboriginal or Native American art that shows you the grays. And then there's some, ancient Sumerian art that shows you reptilians. You know what I mean?
Well, I've had the privilege, I consider it a privilege, of having access to large amounts of magic mushrooms, which I grow myself. And I have these incredible vision quests and journeys where I have come into contact with these intelligences that I actually owe much of where I am now today to the conversations that I've had with these intelligences. I understand it really as the main entity I'm contacting is my higher self, and I just already know everything about my life, and I'm just drip feeding myself bits of information that'll help me along my path. That's the way I've seen it, but I've also come into contact with these other seemingly intelligences that aren't really as human in nature than the other ones that I've come into contact with. So it is very fascinating how in these altered states we can somehow make contact with these things.
I would be very, very careful, personally.
Oh, yeah.
So back in the ancient Greece, there were the mystery cults. And if we really break down what the mystery cults were, there were mushroom cults. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been a lot of controversy about this stuff. But if you go back and read the literature and read like real good scholars like Walter Burkert on these cults, they were incredibly disciplined. They weren't just sitting around gobbling mushrooms all day. They were, they spent most of the time like in meditation and prayer and fasting. And it was all ultimately what it was about was avoiding bad trips. And a bad trip, in my estimation, is when your experience is intruded upon by malevolent entities. Okay. I've had bad trips myself, and I know what they were like. But I also, for instance, back in 1986 met Jesus during a mushroom trip, and that was like a really pure experience that I am very sorry that I was never able to recapture. But
Yeah.
I think that you need to really ground yourself, because I have seen too many people, make that their religion and end up almost semi-zombified. How old are you again?
I'm 44.
Okay, so I'm 13 years older than you. I just have seen a lot of people like so-called psychonauts just turn into what I call gray people. So there's this whole idea that you can end up like some raving lunatic or demon possessed or something. I mean, I think there is definitely a risk of that. But I think more often than not, people just become very gray and depressed and just joyless. And and I think that is the real. That to me is the real hazard or potential danger behind using things like magic mushrooms without having a very strong and daily practiced spiritual foundation in your life.
Well, that is what you just described is the opposite of my experience. Before I even started using magic mushrooms, I was meditating on a daily basis, and first made contact with my higher self through meditation. My higher self then explained to me that because of who I am and where I want to go, that magic mushrooms would help facilitate a dialogue between me and my higher self. And I was taught how to protect myself, how to avoid these negative trips, these negative energies that came along. And I was lucky enough to have myself as a teacher through every experience. I'd go in maybe once a month with a pretty high dose of mushrooms that I grow myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had very few bad experiences, but it's only because I was brave enough to go in and learn. And I have various ways of grounding myself through these experiences, but they've just become pure learning experiences, and I always have this tether, this anchor to my reality, my purpose, where I fall in the scheme of all this spiritual stuff and the nonsense in between, and how I can focus on where I'm really supposed to go. And since I've had that understanding and kept it since I first started doing these a few years ago, it's only enhanced everything and gotten better and made my life better and gave me a more whole understanding of everything, and my relationships have blossomed, and I'm in just an incredible place because I've believed that I've done it the right way and not the way that you described some people doing it, who approach it very irreverently and really without an understanding of the consequences that could happen.
No, I agree with you. It's interesting. I just recently did an interview with an author named Louis Ungett, who wrote a book called Return of the Dragon. And he took a very negative perspective on this material. Now, there are a lot of hallucinogens that I'm, skeptical of, to say the least, particularly powerful hallucinogens. I've never had a negative experience with magic mushrooms. Always positive. It's not something that I feel the need to do again. But things have to be done, with a sense of responsibility, a sense of grounding. Like, I am not against the use of hallucinogens, psychedelics. I'm against the misuse of them. I'm against the abuse of them, which I think, unfortunately, is the rule and not the exception. What you're describing is the exception. I mean, just one thing that I would say, though, is like, what is your criteria for determining that this is your higher self? I mean,
it took a while to come to that understanding. It really did.
But this is what
it was a series of tests. I put myself through tests. I would really just question myself. It started out because I grew up in the Catholic Church, filled with this dogma and belief in angels and demons and good and evil and how we interact with these things. And I started out my experiences questioning it based on that Christian Catholic dogma, and just built a relationship based on the understanding of, I'm good, I know I'm good, I know I'm part of the light, and I will always identify and gravitate towards that. And it just built off of that relationship basis. And there was only positivity and wanting the best for where I'm supposed to go. And I just had this overwhelming just knowing that this is me. This is me from the past, present, and future. I'm just talking to the deepest depths of my consciousness.
I don't have your experiences, so I can't really comment on that. But right. What you're sounding reminds me very much of, like, the what some traditions have called the guardian angel. Trying to think with the terminology that somebody like Jung would use, the psychopomp. My only caveat here is, like, I really think that it's a trap to focus on yourself. Okay. Like, so you might see this reality and interact with it as your higher self. But maybe it's a higher being, maybe it is an angelic being. Problem, this gets down to a problem that I'm constantly chafing up against, is that we tend to put things in boxes based on terminologies, what we call these things. And often I think that people don't understand that it's just a perspective, that the experience itself is outside of our understanding. It's outside of our control. It's outside of our influence. And we are, the objects of this, and we need to see that. I think for mental health, at least, to see that, that you're interacting with a greater reality. But when you start to see this as the self, I mean, this is something that I've chafed against for a number of years, like when you get into the whole idea of the God within. So the God within, okay, so I understand that concept, but I also understand how that concept gets sort of passed down to the hoi polloi, where it becomes, I'm God. You know, I mean,
Well, here's the
I
thing.
can't tell you
I've
how many
gone.
people I've encountered over the, past 40 years now that I've sort of been in investigating these things, who come to see
Yeah.
themselves as God, that they are like some sort, it's like this.
I agree. That is also a trap because I have gone through these stages where I would go back and forth and have this limited understanding of what you were saying, like, oh, I am a God. And then I'd go deeper and say, no, we are all really part of this collective consciousness. We're all part of one, even though we're fractals of the one. We can't really consider ourselves the end all be all of creation and everything, and that it all stems from us, because it's much larger than that. There's so much that's outside of us and outside of our inner kingdom. I agree completely. But I've been beneficial enough and lucky enough to see that and not just stop at, oh, I'm a god, I'm going to go form a cult and get these people to follow whatever I say. That I see happening very often with people, and it's very dangerous. They come to an understanding and they just stop at that understanding, this dangerous level of where they haven't gone far enough, but they've gone just far enough to get themselves into trouble where they believe they're at.
No, I agree with that. And I think, again, this gets down to terminologies and teams, like what team you on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always felt very, part of a Christian tradition, right? But my problems with Christianity come down to cosmology, come down to terminology, come down to a lot of the ways Christianity is practiced, where, say, scripture and theology become idols.
Yeah.
Okay? Become, it becomes a form of idolatry. And that's something that I'm uncomfortable with. And, it's like, I don't have problems. When I remember, so I told you about that experience I had with encountering Jesus during a mushroom trip, and then I got a little book of the New Testament, which I still have in the other room, and I read the thing from beginning to end, and I was just like, wow, this is not what I thought it was. This is not what they told me in church. This is not like. This is like during the time when the religious right were kind of on the ascendancy, and it's like this has nothing to do with the religious right. This is very countercultural, let's just say, and it like very much fit into this whole worldview that I had. That sort of epiphany got burnt away by just dealing with a lot of Christians who are, like I said, I mean, I don't want to Christian bash in any way, but I think it just becomes a form of idolatry, and it becomes a big ego stroke, particularly with like boomer evangelicals, okay, of which I have in my family. Yeah. And it is just, it's a big ego trip. And I feel very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
I feel very uncomfortable with that. But also, a lot of the ways a lot of Christians just don't, like basic things like just take care of themselves physically. I mean, the Apostle Paul said that the body is the temple of God. How many, just think of a lot of Christians that and certainly not all or even a majority, but a lot, just don't take care of themselves at all. I see a lot of, people, they become obese, just don't take care of don't maintain their temples, let's just say. You know what I mean? Eat bad food, drink beer, whatever. I mean, I don't know. But the point is that studying all this ritualism, to me, has sort of taught me that what I'm seeking is a communion that transcends symbol, that transcends ritual, that transcends idol, that transcends icon, that transcends theology, that transcends cosmology, but is just a pure state of communion. Okay. And I've been able to, it's been very helpful to me to see all this crazy, obsessive OCD ritualism that we see in politics and culture and media. Like I said, a lot of it is, very highly influenced by, Masonic thinking, like evolution, for instance. And it's just like, well, that's what I don't want, and then you have a lot of like sort of like Christian bros on social media now.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't want to discourage them. I don't want to, criticize them, but I just sit there and I go, you're making the same mistakes that the boomers made back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's like you're falling into the same traps. And to me, it's not my place, but it's just like, you're not following the gospel. You're following the institution, no matter how much they might claim to not do so. There are, like, say, mystical aspects of Orthodox Christianity that I think are very encouraging. But it always just comes like, oh, well, this is what I believe now, and I'm better than you. And, I'm more, saved than you are. I have the thing that just drove me crazy back in the 90s. When I first got on AOL back in like the early 90s, I'd go to these like Christian boards, and it's like everybody was just attacking each other. Oh, well, wait, you're Northern Baptist. Well, I'm a Southern Baptist. Oh, you're a Orthodox Presbyterian. It's just like, just people like who should have everything in common, just attacking each other just for the ego boost.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, this has been really corrosive, I think, to the culture in general, but also to the religious traditions, where it's just like all this sectarianism that we saw bring Europe to its knees in the wars of religion following the Reformation. If you just get into this whole pissing match about who's closer to the truth or to God or to Jesus or something, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. And so I don't know. But like I said, it's like I'm after something else. I mean, I'm after transcending language itself, and just like, what is just the pure experience? Like I'm outside a lot, just like walking the streets, particularly at night, and just like trying to tune into those energies. And just a pure experience, because like I said, that experience back in 86, it was on a beach, right? It was like this amazing day, and I'm on a beach, I'm tripping on mushrooms. And so I don't know. There was like an innocence to it, but but like I said, so the synchromistic work and studying all this ritual nonsense has really helped me personally as a negative example. Like, no, I'm not interested in all this idolatry and all this ritualism and, trying to make deals with entities for unfair advantage in life. I'm not interested in that. I'm not, it's like, I don't want to use the spiritual realm to bolster my ego or my bank account. That's just, it's beside the point, and it traps you in meat. It traps you in your head, traps you in the ego. And the ego is that's the ultimate black iron prison, is the ego. You don't need to worry about the archons or any of the rest of it if you're imprisoned by your ego. Never mind the rest of it. You're your own jail keeper. The black iron prison is the self.
Yeah.
And this is revelation that, to me, all the great religious traditions preach. Get out of your head. Stop thinking that your temporal needs are somehow bound to your spiritual enlightenment. I mean, it can get extreme with like extreme forms of asceticism and mortification and so on. And that to me is like, that's almost like an ego trip in itself. But just seeing like just this obsessive craziness with all the symbolism, and it's just like, just stop doing this.
Yeah.
It's stupid. It's not getting you anywhere. Anywhere. It just makes you sick in the head. Just stop it with all this stuff. But they keep doing it, and now it's all almost inevitably drifting towards Satanism. The Satanist stuff is just more and more open. You see all these people on social media. It's like, oh, I'm trans communist Satanist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm also a map. I mean, it's like they're bragging about like just complete degeneracy. They don't, it's like, oh, I'm transgressive. You're not transgressive. You're a degenerate. And it's all going to end badly for you. And believe me, I've been on this planet long enough to see it always end badly for these people. Always, without 100%. Exception. It's like, get out of your head, get out, be grateful, realize that you're in the champagne of the universe. It's not going to get any better than this. And just work on just seek happiness. Seek happiness and spiritual fulfillment. And you won't have to worry about all these other things. You need very, very little to be happy in this life. Seriously. I have a friend, I don't know if you know, Mike Cleland. Have you interviewed Mike?
Not yet, no.
He did the book on the owls and messengers. But anyway, he was a wilderness guide for a number of years. And he said, what being out in the wilderness taught me? You'd go out in the wilderness with like a backpack and pan, cook over an open fire. He said, what being out doing the wilderness training taught me is that you really don't need a lot to be happy. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that those open spaces are the champagne room. They really are. I mean, you're out in the midst of it. Oh, yeah. You can probably go out and see all the stars at night.
Oh yeah.
God bless. It's awesome. But
yeah, me and my fiance are gonna get married on a mountain in the middle of the wilderness in a few months. So
good for you.
That's gonna be a good time there. Yeah, man. I think this is a perfect note to end everything on. We live in some wild times, but I am super stoked to be here during these times. I
was born for these
fascinating
times. Yeah.
Yes, that's why we're here. Christopher, thank you so much. This was great. We'll definitely have to go deeper into this in the future. Before you go, just remind the audience where they can find all your wonderful stuff.
secretsun.blogspot.com, and also Secret Sun Speaks, or Secret Sun Blog, at Secret Sun Blog on Twitter. I've been hanging around there a lot. Do a search for the Secret Sun group on Facebook, and then the Secret Sun Institute for Advanced Synchromysticism on Patreon. And it's been rock and roll. And then I have some private blogs that I've been doing. I mean, working on 2 books. There's a lot going on. I'm keeping myself busy. It's very exciting.
Awesome, man. This was great. We'll do it again soon. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see you then.